Although it is perhaps the most collectible Pokemon card of all time, base set Charizard is not very good. It was completely outclassed by two Stage 1 fire types in the exact same set, those being Arcanine and Ninetales. I tried to construct a Charizard deck to make a video on, however the best I could do is pairing it with Venusaur, and it was still god-awful. But with the Rocket expansion, we got Dark Charizard, and even though it has 40 less HP, its attacks are much, much better. For starters, you actually have the option to deal a little bit of chip damage with Nail Flick. With the base set Charizard, your only option was to spend 4 fire energy dealing 100 damage. You couldn't deal smaller amounts of damage if you wanted to. Continuous Fireball is also a more energy conservative attack. Now, you're not guaranteed damage because you do have to flip a coin for each fire energy attached, but you can pull off the attack with only 2 fire energy, which means that on turn 2 you could Breeder straight into Charizard, and that's after adding in energy with Charmander's ability, but we'll get to that in a second. So you can deal anywhere between 0 and 100 damage. You're averaging 50 for 2 energy, which is pretty great. And when you take into account that you can just stack a lot of fire energies on this thing late game, say your opponent has a Blastoise out and you swap in your Charizard, you can just throw down 4 energy on this thing and assume that, okay, on average, I'm going to deal 100 damage. And it's not always going to work out that way. Anyone that's played with TCG knows that you're never going to hit those key coin flips when you need them. But that's part of the fun of this particular build. And the other key card that helps this Charizard shine a little bit more than the base set one is, of course, the Rocket Charmander that came out. With its ability, you can move a fire energy off of one of your other Pokemon onto that Charmander, which comes in really handy when you're about to evolve that turn. So say you've been stalling with a Magmar. You can retreat it to the bench potentially or use a switch. Use Charmander's ability to move a fire energy to it, attach your normal one, and that Dark Charizard is ready to go. Of all the builds of Dark Charizard that I tried, this one was the most successful and the most consistent. So let's get into the basic structure of this deck and chat a bit. So of course we're going to start out with the Rocket Charmander. With Pokemon Breeder, you can go straight from Charmander to Dark Charizard. So I don't use any of the Dark Charmeleons in this deck. It's much more efficient just to go straight into Charizard, especially when you have Pokemon Breeder that handy and Boss's Way to get the Dark Charizards in your hand super quick. So a playset of Dark Charizard as well. The main thing that's holding this card back is mainly that 80 HP, which all of the Dark Pokemon kind of exchange more powerful attacks for less HP. It's just that it puts it in range of getting knocked out by a lot of Haymaker Pokemon, especially when they can just throw down some plus powers on it. I think if it maybe had 10 more HP, that 90 sweet spot, that kind of made it a 3-hit KO in most cases instead of 2. And of course, this is a fire deck, so Magmar is going to go in there. It's a great card all by itself, one of the best fire basics for sure. And it's got 2 great attacks that you can stall out with while you're getting your Charizard set up on the bench. To cover the water weaknesses, Electabuzz does a great job. You really just need to get out there and Thundershock. It's another great stall card, and it's got a solid 70 HP to help you stall a little bit more too. Ditto's in here for those really strange matchups that you'll get into. It's very situational, but it can help you stall out a bit more and combat the major archetypes like Haymaker. Not as much the Rain Dance because you do have Electabuzz to help stall out on that. The Professor Oak and Bill are your basic draw power. Boss's Way to get those Dark Charizards in your hand. Only really running 3 of them in this deck, because usually by the time you've Professor Oaked once or twice, you're going to be able to get at least one of the Dark Charizards in your hand and at least one Charmander to throw down on the bench. Nightly Garbage Run, running the standard 2 copies of that just to help recycle those energy that you need. I only run 4 lightning energy in this deck, so if you do get in a situation where you have to rely on Electabuzz, you're going to have to Nightly Garbage Run those out of your discard pile probably to get them back on future Electabuzz that you're going to play. For a Pokemon Breeder to get those 4 Charizards out, I do have Item Finder in this deck, so a lot of these cards you may be thinking, well, you should probably run 3 or 4 of those. I kind of had to spread out my trainer base. Usually, I'm running maybe 3 or 4 of just a certain few key cards that help out the deck. But in this case, I have a lot of bases to cover, like Last. Last helps combat energy removal. So you play all of the trainers you want from your hand, leaving Last for last. And then you can play that and make sure that energy removals stay out of your opponent's hand. Computer search and item finder are pretty self-explanatory. Switches in there to get those Magmars and Electabuzz out of the active once you have a Charizard ready to go, or if you have that Charmander ready to go, so you aren't wasting an energy to retreat Magmar and you can switch it onto that Charmander right before evolving. And like I said, only 4 lightning energy in this deck for the Electabuzz because they are very situational and the deck is pretty fire heavy. Your main focus is going to be powering up those fire Pokemon, using Magmar as a utility mon, kind of as backup for Dark Charizard so that mid-game and late game you can come in and sweep with those continuous fireballs. So it is completely possible you could start a match and really need Electabuzz and all 4 of those lightning energy can be prized. However, that's just how the game goes. Pretty much I found that if you Professor Oak once, you're probably going to end up getting a lightning energy if you really need it. If not, there's plenty of draw power in this deck. You could always computer search. Odds are you're going to get something in your hand that can get you 1 lightning energy, since that's all you're really going to need to throw down on an Electabuzz. And even though I did say you're going to be stalling out with Magmar and Electabuzz, this deck is actually very offensive. Smokescreen, Smog, Thundershock, these are all attacks that can really mess up your opponent's strategy and keep them on their toes, especially since you can probably 9 times out of 10 swap to your bench out of those turn 2 with a Charizard that's ready to give a continuous fireball and deal that, 50 damage on average. And the trainer base for this deck is all meant to streamline the process, get what you need when you need it. And I cut out all of the defensive stuff, all of the stuff that could help the deck, but potentially slowed it down as well. One of the biggest omissions here is energy retrieval. You would think that if you're using continuous fireball over and over again, you're going to have a lot of energies in the discard pile and you're going to need to get those back. Now, if you're playing a slower build of this deck that's meant to be more powerful in the very late game, energy retrieval is a good way to go. However, I think just having those nightly garbage runs and the item finders to use more than 2 of those if needed is enough to serve this deck and get enough fire energy back that you can keep supporting the Charizards as you go. So if you are going to run that kind of build, you will be running a much different trainer base. For example, you'll want to run things like Goop Gas Attack to help deal with decks that rely heavily on abilities. These are going to be able to block your Rocket's Drowsy, your Dark Gloom, your Rain Dances, your Energy Trans, your Damage Swaps, at least for 1 turn. That way you can kind of put together a strategy and say, okay, on this turn, I'll play Goop Gas Attack so that my opponent can't use any of their abilities. It'll slow them down for 1 turn, and that's when I'm going to get them on my next turn. You're also going to want to keep those Charizards alive while you're channeling those fire energy onto them every turn. So to do so, you may want to play things like Defender. That way, if you know there's a big attack coming that your Charizard isn't going to survive, you can play Defender and narrowly escape, and maybe next turn use something like Potion to heal it up and get it back in Fighting Spirit again. And I know that Ditto is most useful when paired with double colorless energy. That's when it's at its best. So if you don't really like it in this deck, having to use the fire energy on it, you could always replace it with something like Clefable. Clefable is another card that's great at shutting down your opponent's strategy by just copying their attacks. Clefable does it a bit better because it can do it for only 1 energy, but then you run the risk of getting the Clefairy sniped, and it's unnecessarily bulking up your deck a little bit. The same can be said for Dark Dragonair and Dark Dragonite, which I have seen paired with Dark Charizard before, because they get you those evolution cards into your hand They get you the Pokemon you need. However, they do bulk up the deck a little bit. They do run pretty well with Dark Charizard because you can still keep it mono fire. However, I just found that running 3 copies of Boss's Way really got the job done, and I didn't need anything else in there. So let me know down in the comments how you would run a Dark Charizard, because I did have a little bit of trouble at first getting a stable build. And also let me know what kinds of decks you would like to see me put up next. So until next time, guys, bye.